studio. How are you, Barbara?
Hello, hi, how are you doing, Alec? Nice to speak to you. Thank you for
Yeah,
having
great.
me.
36 years to be back in Ireland. Fantastic. Delighted to hear that. However, I'm going to take you back some time now, and we're going to talk about your last year in school, purely just to give us the base from which we can start.
Okay. So my last year in school, gosh, that seems like such a long time ago. I quite enjoyed school, actually. Like many probably Irish people, I went to a convent school and was very much looking forward to finishing school because I literally wanted to get started. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work in business. And I also felt I'd like to travel. But beyond that, I was clueless.
Gosh, that sounds familiar to me as well. Okay, so you obviously not going to go on to academia, so you decided to wade into the world of business. Where did you go first, or how did you start?
Well, the first thing I did, God, is showing my age now, is I did a secretarial course, and that was to learn how to type, which many of your young listeners might think, what is she talking about? Everybody just uses one finger now. But in those days, you learn to touch type and do shorthand and stuff that would prepare you for getting a job in an office, which was kind of, I knew if I wanted to work in business, I'd have to start in an office somewhere. So that's what I did. I did a secretarial course, SULS, I think it was called, secretarial course, somewhere in the centre of Dublin.
And I must say, so many people could benefit from the skills you learned on that secretarial course around typing today.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. You learn how to try and not make mistakes and do it very quickly, and it was great. Actually, it was a great skill because then you actually can become quite proficient when you get to laptops and computers and stuff.
Fantastic. So, okay, you now have your course under your arm. Where did you head off to?
Oh my goodness, my first job was working for a lawyer or solicitor's office. And I was working in the very top of the building. And I swear to God, there must have been 20 flights of stairs to get to the very top. And there was an electric typewriter with pre-printed letters. And all I had to do was put, the dear was I should put Miss Fitzpatrick and the amount of money that was owed. I did that for 4.5 days. And I thought, there has to be more to life than this. There were two ladies I worked with in this cubby hole of an office up the very top of the stairs, I say, like the sort of servants' quarters. And the man I worked for was called Mr. Bent. And I thought, I'm working for a lawyer. It's all about debt collection and his name is Bent. This is sending you a message, Barbara. Get the hell out of here. So Thursday lunchtime, I went to what you could do in those days was just go to a recruitment office and said, I need a job. I want to start on Monday. I went back in the afternoon and resigned, didn't go in on the Friday, had an interview on Monday with an advertising agency, and I got the job, and I was absolutely delighted because I thought this is something I could be interested in. And in fact, that's kind of where I found my first mentor. And the man I worked for, Brendan Miller, was fantastic to all the young people who worked for him. He literally, I felt like he taught me everything I knew. And within, a few months, I moved out of a secretarial role actually into the department, and they encouraged me to go back. I went to night school and I did a diploma in marketing, which actually, when I completed it, they then gave me the money back that I'd paid to do it. So that was a great start. I was very lucky to have got that.
And I tell you, a lot of people don't appreciate the benefit of a good mentor and also getting good training.
Absolutely. And the training I had in that company, O'Keeffe's Advertising, literally stood me in good stead. They were incredibly professional. There was a lot of client facing. I was in media planning and buying, and the level of detail they went into, the way in which they did their business was actually top class. I didn't realize it at the time, but sure. Looking back, all that I learned, at the hand of Brendan and his colleagues actually really stood me in good stead when I went on to do other things.
And it's funny, you just identified something there that so many people would recognize is that what you were getting to learn and understand, you didn't appreciate its true value at the time. It was only to come back later.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think when I left there, I became media manager. So in effect, I got his job and he got promoted. If you'd have told me that at the start, I wouldn't have believed it. But I think one of the lessons I've learned, if anything, is if you want to get ahead, is always to put your hand up and say, I'll do that, even if you haven't a clue how to do it. Like getting out of your comfort zone and putting your hand up to take on challenges. It shows an employer that you're willing to learn and also be willing to make mistakes. Often we're
Yes.
afraid to make mistakes, aren't we? But actually, if you put your hand up and you do something and you make a mistake, you will learn from that and you won't make that mistake again.
And again, that is of great value to the company and to you as well as an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how long did you spend there?
I was there for 7 years, and then I left Ireland in the early 80s when a lot of people were leaving because there wasn't really that many jobs. And I left for love. I married a Scotsman. I went to live in Edinburgh, and I thought I would carry my career in advertising, working in media. And the first job I got in media over there, I felt was kind of like a step backwards because I'd been doing such really great work when I was in Dublin, working on international clients and doing, all different types of media. Whereas in Scotland, it felt, at least to me, to be a bit parochial. So I left there after about a year, and I decided to go and join a startup because I wanted to move into client relationship management. I wanted to work managing clients. And again, I suppose that was a bit of a risk. But I knew if I'd have stayed where I wasn't really going to progress very much. And I was quite bored doing what I was doing in the first job in Scotland. So, maybe I kind of realized that actually I need to get out of here. And I think sometimes we're reluctant to leave if we don't have a job to go to, or we're afraid we're giving up, a bird in the hand and all that. But when, I was a lot younger then, I thought, I'll just get a job, and it was the best thing I did to get out of that. And really, I spent the rest of my career in some form of client relationship management, whether it was in advertising or technology or financial services. It was always in client relationship management because I love people. I like meeting kind of different people. And, maybe I sort of fell into that, although it was my natural kind of thing I love doing.
Yes, well, it obviously you love interacting with people, and also as the jobs were progressing, you have a sense of networking which probably hadn't come to the fore yet, but was in an undercurrent, bubbling away.
Well, that's right, and almost all the jobs I've got have been through someone saying, "Go and have a chat with Barbara," or "I know a person who could do that for you," or "Barbara, they're looking for one of those. I think you'd be a good fit." So I'm very fortunate in my career. I consider myself to have been very lucky. But you're right, Alec. I probably didn't even realize I was networking in those days when I was.
And in fact, most people misunderstand their networking. It's about building trust and rapport with people as opposed to trying to sell them something.
Well, that's right. And now in my role as a leader of Kindred Business Networking, the one thing I teach people about is net giving rather than networking. And you're absolutely right. It's coming with an attitude of service, not sales.
So tell us, you were in Scotland and you went with a startup. Tell us about them, because you had a couple of interesting experiences and challenges.
I did. We were a startup. There was only 7 of us when we started, and we were trying to sort of get new business. And we decided to do a campaign to all the people who were using advertising agencies to basically say, if you're unhappy and you want to create a short list, come and have a chat with us. And we're trying to think of something kind of different. And we came up with the idea that if it came to a toss of a coin, use ours. And we actually put a double-sided coin, a 20p coin, double-sided. And, 1 or 2 people got the joke and thought it was funny. And in fact, we got one phone call from the marketing director of a company called JLG Industries, John Elgrove. So they did all these huge, big access platforms. And he decided to take a punt on us. We pitched for the business and we won it. And one of the first, and I remember actually going up to Cumbernauld, which is, in the depths of the middle of Scotland, and learning to drive one of these access platforms so that I could actually tell the creative guys what it means and what they do. And they had a new product called a range lift, which was the first of its kind in the world. And it meant it was an access platform with no feet. And what that means, it's like a sort of truck, and it can park in the space of a truck and not have these huge big feet that means you have to block off the roads. So they're used for cleaning tunnels in Europe, was kind of one of the main jobs they did. Anyway, we decided to put this on Tomorrow's World. And for those of you old enough to remember Tomorrow's World, it was a TV show where they had new inventions. Anyway, we took a video of this range lift, which I did get to drive actually. And we sent it down to them in London, and they sent a crew up to Glasgow, and they went about filming, cleaning the glass roof of huge big shopping centres way up in the sky, and also cleaning all the bird poop off the square, the top of the statue in our square. So that sort of got us a lot of activity. And I spent 5 years there. I got to be a director before I was 30, which was one of my goals. I wanted to be a director before I was 30. And when I got it, I realized, well, actually, I had all the responsibility before, and now I have all the other stuff that kind of goes with it. But it was a nice thing to achieve within my deadline.
There was something you mentioned about that particular project, because you had brought in a young creative team, was number one. And number two, I think, was that not an award-winning project for you as well?
Well, actually, I did bring a young creative team in for that, but there was a project I did in my next business for the Scottish Prison Service, which
right.
was quite.
I was mixing up the two.
Yes, quite unusual. And they just very quickly, the Scottish Prison Service at the time couldn't recruit prison officers because new private prisons had opened in Scotland, and they took a lot of the talent. And what happens when you don't have enough prison officers is they can be riots in the prison because they can't get to watch the football because there's not enough prison officers to secure them and stuff. Anyway, we took a very different view of launching that campaign, and it won lots of awards. It was very successful, and it actually got me my next job.
Great. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest is Barbara Fitzpatrick. Let me just pick up on that, because I did mix up two things. In terms of JLG, actually, they got some serious sales out of that.
They did. They sold 3 trucks, which at the time they were in excess of 150 grand, and they sold 3 of them on the back of Tomorrow's World. So, we were heroes.
Yeah, we were heroes, exactly. Sorry, and then to come to the prison service, I think, tell our audience about your approach to that, because they were having issues. Explain how the issues had arisen.
Well, when they recruit prison officers, they put like small ads in the recruitment section of newspapers. So if you're not looking for a job, you'd never go down that. And nobody looks for a job as a prison officer. Let's face it, it doesn't have the same cachet as police or ambulance or any of the other sort of an AA or emergency services. So my approach was to look at it the way I look at brand advertising, all the way back to my first job. What are the disciplines? What are the challenges? What are the problems? Who are we trying to attract? What language do they talk in? And so I took a young creative team, and we visited 4 different prisons in Scotland, which was a bit of an eye-opener. We went to a women's prison, yes, a young offenders institute, a men's prison, and then worst of all, Barlinnie, which is where they have very, very serious criminals. And we interviewed the prison officer and said, why on earth do you do this job? Why do you do it? And the people who did the job well were the people who wanted to help prisoners to basically get back into society, not just lock them up. And that was the kind of individual the prison service was now trying to attract. So we came up with a campaign that was completely away from doing little recruitment ads, and it was doing, double page spreads and the sort of the red tops, which are the red top newspapers of the day. And the campaign was actually all about real life stories. And we had one story where we didn't say the prisoner or the prison officer, but this particular prison officer agreed that a prisoner was allowed to attend his mother's funeral because he felt it was a minimal risk for the value of the emotional well-being it would allow this individual. So treating people with respect. And they got the intake for the next kind of three groups that they required for the prison service. Because as you know, you start with a big population, and the funnel gets very small very quickly because of all the criteria. But actually, the lady that was the HR person there, who I'd never met, gave me my next job, which was, so it just goes to show you that even if you don't know people hear of you, and they hear about what you do and how you work. And I think the one thing I've learned is people may never remember what you say, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And that's what they tell other people about. And that's one thing I think is a great lesson, is make sure you make people feel special.
Sure.
And listen to people, because they will remember that. So she went to another startup, actually, my second startup, but this was a technology startup in Silicon Glen, which is the kind of, Silicon Valley of Scotland is Silicon Glen. And it was a Silicon Valley type business based in Silicon Glen in Scotland. And she needed someone to come in and launch the brand globally. And
Right.
she said to the shareholders, you need to go and talk to Barbara. And that's how I got that job.
Fantastic. Wow. So take us on. Where are we going next?
Where do we go? So I moved to London then, and I spent kind of the last 20 years in London, and I worked for some amazing, one of the best companies I've ever worked for was GE, and I was very fortunate to get onto their leadership training program, which meant I did 2 years at their own university called Crotonville, which is in New York. They're that big that they have their own university. And my God, you worked sort of, they were like 14-hour days for 2 weeks flat. And they basically gave you a business to run. You worked together as a team. And again, it was really, really good training. And I learned so much there. And I'm so grateful to GE for that. And I traveled all over the US, as I had done in my previous job, and also had a lot of clients across Europe. So the whole travel bug I had was really satisfied. And, I loved every minute of GE, but then of course, when the financial crash came, GE closed most of its businesses. And my role was made redundant, but I was fortunate enough to get a job in one of their other businesses. But 70% of people lost their jobs in GE in the early 90s. 70% of the headcount was cut right across Europe.
Goodness. I mean, that's a serious headcount to lose, and also the impact on everybody's lives around that.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a good point you make there, Alec, about the effect it has on people's lives, because I've been made redundant lots of times. It's part of life in corporate, but how that's managed makes a real difference. And I remember being made redundant from Saatchi and Saatchi's when they closed the Edinburgh office, but the way in which they took care of people and supported us in finding new roles, I would have worked for them in a heartbeat. Again, I would have worked for them again in a heartbeat. And I think it's important, if you are an individual that is ever responsible for making people redundant, which is not a nice part of your job, but doing it with kindness, with respect, and making people understand that it's the role that's being made redundant, not them. Because often people take it personally, don't they?
Of course they do. Yeah, they think, oh, what's wrong with me? And why didn't so-and-so go instead of me? This sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think you've identified something very valuable there. It's the role that has now gone, not you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the support that's around that. And I think a lot of SME business owners fail to see that, because again, they're too busy at the coalface dealing with other things, as opposed to appreciating the long-term value of your brand, and the culture of your organization is involved here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even people who leave you can still speak very well of you, and they may indeed become your ambassadors of the future. But if you treat people disrespectfully, then, they're not going to be singing your praises, are they?
Certainly not. Certainly not. But you did, I know you'd gone to GE, but you had worked with a number of other organizations as well, like Amex, and was it MasterCard, and a number of...
Yes,
How did you find that?
I loved working with American Express. I worked with American Express Global Business Travel. In fact, that was my last big corporate job, and I love my job. I worked for an amazing woman. She's probably one of the best leaders I've ever worked with. And again, the global business travel was the one that had the most opportunity, as opposed to the card, the American Express card. And it was sold to a US bank, who literally got rid of the whole leadership team overnight. And that I was then in my sort of mid to late 50s. And as I said, I'd been made redundant before, but this time I wasn't, in my mid 50s. And that was the challenge, trying to actually find another role. And I was right at the top of my game. I just won a leadership award, and my team had won 5 of the 8 awards for Europe. We just retained the biggest client, which was worth 30 million. And you would think, well, it's not going to be me. And hey ho, it was me. And that's life.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to me, Alec, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Barbara Fitzpatrick. Yes, and you've just identified something. And the fact that you were performing certainly didn't negate the fact that, hey, we're just going to make this team redundant. And it's amazing the number of crunchers get involved. And
yeah.
But as you identified, and I must say you have a very sanguine sort of thought process around this, that, this is part of corporate life. People just get made redundant and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more and more now in the current climate that we're in, people will continue to get made redundant. And as I did, and I still wanted to work. I still needed to work. I had a huge network. I must have applied for over 100 jobs. I would get shortlisted. I'd get down to the last two. The role would either be withdrawn, there'd be a recruitment freeze, or it would go to somebody in their 20s or 30s. And that's...
Sorry, Barbara, go on.
That's hard to take.
It certainly is. And I actually said to you, as we were just having the intro to the show, I think there's another whole program here about making people redundant, and particularly what we might call ageist and not understanding the benefits that you're letting go out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. People in their mid to late 50s, first of all, are not knackered, which is certainly what the perception is in the UK. You're knackered, you're over the hill, you haven't got any energy left, you don't really have anything to give, and push over now, and we'll just let some young folk in because they have all the energy and they have all the ideas. And indeed, they may have the energy and the ideas, but they certainly don't have the experience and they don't have the emotional intelligence. And you need experience to stop you going up a blind alley. You need people who've made mistakes so that you won't make those mistakes yourself in the future.
Exactly. And this, as I'm always talking about, and we're on the same page here, the value of mentors. And you can't be a mentor unless you've actually been at the coal face yourself and understand what it's like to deal with these things.
Yeah, absolutely, Alec. And I mean, I believe I've been very fortunate in my life to have had some great mentors. And in fact, when I worked with GE, they specifically had a mentoring program for women because they wanted to promote more women. And often, sad is the case, women aren't always the best supporters of women. I found that sometimes. I'm not sure if that's your experience, but you also worked in the corporate space, and that's why I always like to have a mixed team. I don't like to have an all single sex team, whichever it is, but particularly not just all women.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to get the right balance, and certainly I won't comment too much as I step into a field full of landmines.
Yes.
You'll understand. But listen, let's take you on to what you're doing today. I mean, you've reinvented yourself, and that's very, very important. And there's a very important lesson, no matter what stage in your life you're at, you can reinvent yourself, and you have done so.
You absolutely can. And I think the thing to remember is that you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from all those years of experience, all that emotional intelligence, all that skills you have, and all the expertise you have. And, when I got made redundant in my last role, it was very tough because I would get to the point and think, like, how come I can't get another job? What's the problem? And you look at your CV and think, did I actually do all those things? And actually, that's when I did quite a lot of personal development. And I started with a network marketing business called Arbon, which is not in Ireland, but it's very big in the UK. And they helped me get my mojo back. And I started doing a lot of networking then. Sure. And I went around different networking groups. And I honestly didn't find any that matched my values or I thought would really help me. And I just started my own. And I literally just started with once a month in a coffee shop, contacted everyone I'd met through the networking I'd done. And that's when Barbara's Networking Group, which is what I originally called it, was called. It just took off because there were lots of people like me in their late 50s who needed to have an income, needed to reinvent themselves. Maybe they were turning their hobby or their passion into a paid job. And they wanted like-minded individuals, they wanted a community, and they wanted support. And then Kindred Business Networking was really born out of that. I did a big piece of research on all the networking groups at the time in the UK and what they offered and what I felt was missing. And that set up the structure for Kindred Business Networking, which is now a membership organization. And it supports, as you said in your intro, small independent businesses by everybody becoming each other's unconditional ambassadors and supporting each other and collaborating and working together. And we have a lot of fun as well.
Tell me, where can people find out more about that?
Well, I've now launched it in Ireland. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram and Facebook. But if you go to kindrednetworking.ie, that will tell you all about Kindred. It's online, so it doesn't matter where you're based in Ireland. You can come along as a guest, try it out a few times till you see if your values match ours, because we're all about integrity, collaboration, inclusiveness, openness, engagement, and genuinely wanting to help and support each other.
And I suppose also as part of what you do as well, that being a person who's a bit more mature in age, it's about reminding people of the huge amount of resources and talents that they may have forgotten about over the years that they
absolutely, Alec. I mean, I do workshops for my members once a quarter on something that I think will help them in their business, because some people are maybe just starting out, others have been in business a little while. And I also provide business mentoring, because all the 36 years of working and all the mentors I've had, I'm sure, at least I hope I can add value to people. So the bit I really love doing is the business mentoring that's part of the membership with Kindred. And often people just want someone to keep them going, because it can be isolating and lonely when you work for yourself.